This story is based on real events. All names and events are fictitious. Any coincidences with real people and events are coincidental. Christmas is a time of kindness and joy for all people, but not for me. That horrible Christmas has always left a terrible scar on my heart. It started a few weeks before the holiday. On another weekday, I returned from my job at the bank and began my pre-Christmas routine. I put up the tree and started decorating the house. While I was decorating the outside of the house, I saw our neighbor, Mrs. Hudson, on the porch of the house next door, and I called out to her, "Hello, Mrs. Hudson." She waved me over and invited me to have tea with her. I graciously accepted. I went into the house and saw another woman at the table.
"This is Miss Roylott,"
said Miss Hudson.
"She's in a bad way and will be staying with me for a while."
Miss Roylott was a very strange and unpleasant middle-aged person. In spite of the polite smile of her thin lips, her face always looked very emaciated and haggard, as if from illness, her pale face full of a desperate and wistful malice. Since Mrs. Roylott had moved into Mrs. Hudson's house, we had more than once heard the quarrels coming from the house next door. The women often quarreled. I noticed that Mrs. Roylott carried a knife in her purse, just as other women carry lipstick in theirs. I often saw her sitting on the front porch all alone, looking at that knife as if it were her treasure. The strange thing was that she would talk to herself and laugh out loud. This Mrs. Roylott was also very strange to me. I felt she was following me. In a strange way, Mrs. Roylott made a habit of waiting for me on my front porch when I came home from work. She would ask me if I wanted to have fun, if I wanted to go out with her. She said it in such a creepy way that I was disgusted at the mere thought of her suggestion. This Mrs. Roylott was also very strange to me. I felt that she was watching me. In a strange way, Mrs. Roylott made a habit of waiting for me on the porch when I came home from work. She would ask me if I wanted to have some fun, if I wanted to go out with her. She'd say it in such a creepy tone that I was disgusted at the mere thought of her suggestion. I was invited to a Christmas party the night before the holidays. In the evening, as I was about to leave for the party, the phone suddenly rang. It was Mrs. Roylott asking me to come to her house immediately. I heard something in her voice that I hadn't noticed before. I really didn't want to go, but I knew I couldn't have any fun at the party if I refused to help the neighbors. So I went to Mrs. Hudson's house with my heart. The door was ajar and the hallway was dark. I walked in slowly and was shocked by the mess that started in the hallway. Things were strewn about as if there had been a fight. When I entered the living room, I was numb with horror and fear. There was a Christmas tree in the middle of the room and a woman's foot sticking out from behind a mountain of presents. She was turned unnaturally. Suddenly, out of the corner of my eye, I saw the shadow of a female figure on the wall, holding a knife. A sense of danger struck me like lightning. I hurried back to the exit. Mrs. Roylott rushed after me with a kitchen knife and wild screams.
"Heart, I'll cut your heart out. Take it with me,"
she screamed. I will never forget that moment of fear and terror. I don't remember how I got to my house and called 911. My ears were ringing with screams and my heart was pounding. Police arriving at the scene found Mrs. Hudson's body amid a mountain of Christmas presents carefully prepared for her grandchildren and nephews. Mrs. Roylott had fled, taking her friends' money and credit cards with her. See more of our stories